It's hard to believe that your last video is finally here. I think we are all very excited about this. So today what I want to do is just help you to review for this last test that you're going to have in class. It is going to cover everything that you have learned via distance learning. So it's going to cover chapters 9 and 10. There are some important vocabulary words you're going to want to remember. The radius is the distance from the center to any point on a circle. So you can see it's just that area going right there. The diameter is the distance across a circle through the center, so all the way across. And then the circumference, we've talked about it, is the distance around the circle. Remember that pi is 3.14 or 22/7, and that a semicircle simply means it is half of a circle. Now, using some of that vocabulary, this first thing asks us to find the radius. As you can see, it's given us what the diameter is because that's the distance all the way across. And the radius is exactly half. We only want to know what half of this distance is, which half of 20 is 10. So the radius is 10 feet. Next up, find the diameter. So obviously we are looking now to find the entire distance across, not just the radius which was given to us. So we have to double it. So the answer would be 14 meters. These are some formulas that you should know by now. We talked about these before you guys even started distance learning. So make sure that you have memorized all the area formulas for a triangle, square, rectangle, semicircle, and circle. I did not put these in your notes. You can write them down on note cards to help you study, but you may not use these formulas on your test. You need to have them memorized. Meaning that these particular formulas will not be on your cheat sheet. I will show you what will be on your cheat sheet here in just a minute. The first formula that we're going to practice with right now is the area of a circle. So hopefully you remember that that is A equals pi r squared. And then you're simply just going to start plugging some things in. So you want to know this is the distance all the way across, so that has given us the diameter, which means the radius is going to be half of that, so that would be 13. A equals, we know that pi is 3.14 and that our radius is 13, and you have to square that. Remember, you want to make sure that you do the square first before you multiply the other number by the 13. So we're going to have 3.14, and then 13 squared means 13 times 13, so times 169. Go ahead, pause the video, plug that into your calculator, and you should have gotten 530.66 inches squared. On your test or quiz, it will probably say something like this. It will give you the statement that looks like this, where it says it is blank square inches. So when you're actually typing something in, all you need to do is just type in just the numbers instead of the square inches part. That's for when you plug it into the Big Ideas portal. Next instructions asks us to find the area of the semicircle, which is super similar. We still know it is a circle shape, but it's been cut in half, so we're simply going to divide it by 2. Once again, decide whether it gives us the diameter or the radius. This is the distance all the way across the circle, and even though it is a semicircle, a half of a circle, this is still the diameter. So the diameter is 30 feet, which means the radius, you've got to cut it in half, would be 15. So now you just plug in your numbers, 3.14 times 15 squared divided by 2. Remember, 15 squared means 15 times 15, which is 225, and then you want to divide by that by 2. If you can always pause the video, try to do this on your own, and then check your answer to see if you're getting similar or the same as what I am. Now we can see our answer is 353.25 feet squared. Always check to see, did it ask me to round to anything? The instructions here have not asked us to round to anything, so then you would want to plug in your answer to the Big Ideas portal exactly like this for your upcoming test. This next example is something we learned in 9.5. It asks us to classify the pair of angles and then find the value of x. Well, as you can see, this is a straight line, and all straight lines are 180 degrees, which means that they are supplementary angles. So when we're classifying it, it means that this is supplementary. Once again, as I said, 117 and x, these two are going to have to add together to equal 180 degrees. So you can see here 117 plus x equals 180 because once again, a straight line is 180 degrees. So your goal is to get x by itself. You're going to subtract 117 from each side and cancel that out. Drop down the x equals, and you can find out there, it is 63 degrees. All right, don't forget, box in your answers. The next kind of angles that you see here have a 90-degree angle. So those are going to be called complementary angles because anytime it adds up to 90 degrees, it's going to be complementary. So once again, you're going to add up together 4x plus 2x equals 90 degrees. You want to combine those like terms, so 4x plus 2x equals 6x, and then you want to get x by itself, so you're going to divide by that 6 to get it gone. Divide by 6 on both sides, and you find out that x equals 15 degrees. And you want to box in those answers. Anytime you want to double check something like this, you can always plug in the 15 up there. 15 times 2, that would be 30 degrees. And if I also plugged it in over here, 15 times 4 is 60 degrees. And if I were to add those two together, then they would equal 90 degrees, which is what a complementary angle is. The final kind of angle that we're going to talk about today, you can see with these ones that they are two angles that share a vertex. Remember that vertex is in the middle. And then for these ones, you know that these two measures are going to be equal to each other because the kind of angle that this is called vertical. So with vertical angles, this means that 7x equals the same exact thing as x plus 42. Now, if you remember looking at this, this is 1x, okay? So you can stick a little 1 there in front of you if it helps you. You want to get all the x's to one side, so we're going to get rid of this and subtract by 1x to both sides. This cancels out, and you're left with 6x equals 42. Get x alone, you're dividing by 6 on both sides, and x equals 7 degrees. And that is how you find all the different kinds of angles. As I said earlier, you will be able to use a cheat sheet. You cannot use any other notes aside from just these things that you're seeing right here. You cannot use your friend's notes, you cannot use your friend, your tutor, anything like that. These are the only notes you're allowed to use on this test, so make sure you print this off so that it can help you as you take your test. So now we're going to go ahead and use some of these formulas to help us with the next half of the video. This is finding the surface area of the prism. Remember, we've got a length, width, and a height for prisms. So if you can imagine, this 2 right here is going to be the same as this 2 down here. And whenever you're looking straight at an object, that is going to be your length. The height is the thing going up and down, and then the width is going to be the number that you have on the side of your object. So we always want to start off with our formula. We've got the surface area equals 2 times the length times the width. So that's going to be kind of focusing on this area down here. Plus then we're going to also add in 2 times the length times the height, which you can see this. And remember, we always have 2 of these because that's going to be the same thing as this back here in the back, okay? Remember, prisms have a top and a bottom, 2 bases. Plus, we've got to add in one more thing. Remember, this formula is also going to be on your cheat sheet so you can use it on your test, but we've got to also multiply times 2 times the width times the height. And that's going to be this area right here, both on the front and the back. So now we're just going to go ahead and start plugging some numbers in. The length times the width is going to be 2 times 13 plus 2 times the length times the height, which is going to be 2 times 2 times 7, plus the final thing we've got here is we're going to be multiplying 2 times the width, which is 13, times the height, which is 7. Now it's just a matter of plugging these numbers in. 2 times 13 is going to be 26, plus 2 times 7 is going to be 14, and 13 times 7 is 91. All right, pause the video, go ahead and plug these numbers in. And as you add them all up, you should hopefully have found 262 centimeters squared. Remember, in the actual test, it'll say the answer is blank square centimeters, and you would just go ahead and write 262 when you submit it on the portal. All right, so this next one, we are finding the surface area of the prism. Still, remember, a prism is always going to have two bases. So you can see here what our bases are, because there's a triangle here, and you can see that there's another triangle back here. We have a triangle base. All right, so for finding our formula, we've got surface area. Once again, since we just said it is the surface area of two triangles, that's why we would do half times base times height. And then you can see there are 3 different rectangles. Whoops. Because there are different rectangles there, we are going to use length times width, and that's why we have 3 different length times widths. Now remember, these rectangles do not have to be the same length for all of them. That's what I saw on the last quiz. A lot of people were thinking all the rectangles had to be the same length. So let's just kind of focus on this a little bit more. I want you to see once again, we've got 2 times half times base. Now remember, the base is going to be the bottom of our triangle down here. So our base is going to be 4, and then the height of the triangle or the base is going to be 3. Now let's focus specifically on one of the rectangles, all right? Let's focus on this one down here at the bottom. That, you can see, is 4 times 8. Next, we're going to focus on a different rectangle. Let's look at this one. Okay, that's the one kind of out there in the back. Notice you can see that's going to be 3 times 8, and the way that you know it's 8 is because if you see this, that's the same exact length as this one over here. Now let's go ahead and add in our final rectangle, which is the one that's right there in the front, and you can see that that's going to be 8 times 5. Now it's just a matter of plugging in the numbers, so if you want, you can go ahead and pause the video and see if you get the same thing as me. So we've got half of 4, which is 2, and 2 times 3 is 6. If you want to, we can just figure out right there that this is going to equal 12, plus 4 times 8 is 32, plus 3 times 8 is 24, plus 5 times 8 is 40. If you add all of those up together, you find that your answer is 108 inches squared. Once again, when it says on the portal, it is blank square inches, what will you write in the blank, guys? I really want you guys to get this. Instead of anything else, you're just going to put 108. You don't have to tell me 108 square inches because it already says square inches right there. All right, so that's how you find the surface area of a prism. If you're still not understanding that, go back to 9.1. That's the lesson where I taught this concept. Next up, we're going to move on to 9.2, where we learned about finding the surface area of a cylinder. Once again, this is going to be one of those things that you can have on your cheat sheet. So finding surface area of a cylinder is going to be 2 times pi r squared. Now, if you remember, this right here is the area formula for a circle. And as you can see, we've got a circle right here and another one down here. So that's why we have 2 times the area of a circle. Plus, we're going to go ahead and add the lateral surface area, which is 2 pi r h. So the first thing that you want to discover here is this is all the way across the circle, so that does mean my diameter is 8, which means the radius is 4. Go ahead and pause the video and then start plugging things in, see if you can get the same answer as me. All right, just remember that pi is 3.14. My radius is 4, and then my height is 5. 2 times 3.14 is 6.28. 4 times 4, or 4 squared, is 16. Once again, you've got this right here. Multiply those two together and you get 6.28. And then if you multiply 4 times 5 together, you get 20. And you see that 100.48 plus 125.6 equals 226.08. The greatest area that people are missing points on the quiz and test is forgetting to read the instructions. It asks us to round to the nearest whole unit. So remember, you're asking the whole number and into the tenths place to see if you should round up or not. This one you should not round up. So the surface area is about 226 centimeters squared. All right, so now we're going to focus on, instead of surface area, we're going to focus on volume. This is what you learned most recently in 10.5. Remember, when finding volume, you have to figure out first what is the base that you're dealing with, okay? So here, it's a prism once again, so the base is going to be the same thing on top and on bottom. As I'm looking at that, I can see this is clearly a rectangle. So my base is a rectangle. And if you write that down, that's going to help you every time, all right? So let's figure out our formula. This is also on your cheat sheet. You can see that we're going to do volume equals base times height. Now remember, this base is a little bit different. It is a capital B, which means I have to find the area of my base. So as we just discovered, this down here is a rectangle. So instead of putting B for base, we're going to go ahead and plug in length times width, because that is a rectangle, and then you're going to take your height, if you go up, and you'll multiply it times the height. So let's plug in some numbers here. Remember, when you look straight on, this is your length, the width is your side, and the height is going up and down. I always like to see that work too on your quiz and test. So remember, make sure you're writing this down on your quiz and test on notebook paper. So the length is going to be 2, the width is 3, and our height is 6. As you work this out, you can see 6 times 6 equals 36. And the one thing I do want you to make sure you remember is, with volume, you always have to cube the units instead of square them. This next one tends to be a little bit tricky for people, okay? If you remember, with a prism, it has 2 bases. So you've got to see, I can tell by looking at this, it cannot be rectangles that are my bases, because this is one rectangle, this is another one, and then we're going to have this rectangle down here at the bottom. So I know that it is not rectangles because I can only have 2 bases. So instead, it is going to be this triangle in the back is one base, and then this triangle in the front is my other base. So my bases here are going to be triangles. Now, once again, we're still using the same type of formula that we had before. V equals capital base times height. Remember, this is talking about the base. What is the shape of the base? Our shape of a base, once again, is a triangle. So we're doing half times base times height, and then, this is the tricky part, we have to actually multiply by a height again. Now, this height is different than the base height. What I think of when I think of this height, it is what pushes the 2 bases away from each other. So if you remember, we just said that this was one base, and then we also mentioned that this was another base. So the thing that's pushing those 2 apart from each other is going to be what our height is for this object, which will be this area right here. So let's start plugging some numbers in. Look at the base, and we've got half times, and I can see this down here is going to be my base. And then the height, it's really trying to point out that this is the height because it's pointing to the height inside of the triangle. So we're going to multiply times 2. Remember, once again, the height that this next one is talking about is what pushes apart the bases. So that's going to be multiplied times 4. Now we can see half of 6 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, multiply that times 4, and our final answer is 24 inches cubed. Always remember volume, you're going to cube the units instead of square them. The final problem of today, we're going to find the volume of the pyramid, round to the nearest whole number. One thing I want to remind you of, This thing right here is called a hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always what is exactly opposite of that right angle. So whenever you see a right angle, this is going to be your base, and then this going up and down will be your height. But this part that is opposite over here is called the hypotenuse. A lot of people struggled with remembering that part of a triangle. So looking at this, when we are finding the volume, first things first, you have to figure out what the base is. So I can see here that my base is down here, and it also looks like a triangle, okay? And you can see right here we've got that right angle. So my base is a triangle. Once again, you can use your cheat sheet. When looking at the cheat sheet, you can see for finding volume of a pyramid, it's going to be volume equals 1/3 times base, capital B, times height. Just want to emphasize that that capital B means you are finding that base. We want to find the area of our base. So because we know that the area of our base is a triangle, we're going to be multiplying times half times base times height. Now remember, this is just the B part. There's still this other H that's over here, and that is like the slant height. But notice those two heights are going to be different. So plugging things in, 1/3 times half times base times height. This right here is the base of that triangle. This is the height, because remember how we talked about that's right there on that 90-degree angle. So we're going to be multiplying 1/2 times our base there is 2, our height is 10. And then the thing that we're going to be focusing on for this other height is this one right here, and that is talking about the slant height that's going up to a peak at the top. So we're going to multiply that times 4. Let's work on what we've got inside of our parentheses here first. So 2 times 5 is 10, and then half of 10 is going to be 5. And we know that 5 times 2 is 20. So basically here what we've got now, it's like 20/3. If you stick that inside of your calculator, you figure out that you've got 6.6 repeating. Remember, if you go back to your instructions, it asks us to round to the nearest whole number, so that would be rounded up to 7 centimeters cubed. So just as some reminders that should be reminders to you that some people seem to be forgetting, you are allowed to use your cheat sheet that I've created for you that's attached to the portal. You cannot write anything else on it. That would be considered cheating. Also remember, when taking quizzes and tests, you cannot use a friend, you cannot use a tutor, you can't use your notes or any other kind of helps to take the test. I'm assessing your knowledge. I'm kind enough to let you use this cheat sheet, but other than that, please make sure that you are being honest, and I wish you all the best of luck on your final test in 7th grade.